Book 7, The Church of the Social Revolution, Part 2, of The Prophets of Religion, by Upton Sinclair. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Soap Box. This book will be denounced from one end of Christendom to the other as the work of a blasphemous infidel. Yet it stands in the direct line of the Christian tradition, written by a man who was brought up in the church and loved it with all his heart and soul, and was driven out by the formalists and hypocrites in high places. A man who thinks of Jesus more frequently and with more devotion than he thinks of any other man that lives or has ever lived on earth, and who has but one purpose in all that he says and does, to bring into reality the dream that Jesus dreamed of peace on earth and goodwill toward men. I will go farther yet, and say that not merely is this book written for the cause of Jesus, but it is written in the manner of Jesus. We read his bitter railings at the Pharisees, and miss the point entirely, because the word Pharisee has become to us a word of reproach. But this is due solely to Jesus. In his time the word was a holy word. It meant the most orthodox and respectable, the ultra-high church devotees of Jerusalem. The way to get the spirit of the tirades of Jesus is to do with him what we did with the early church fathers, translate him into American. This time, since the reader shares the secret, it will not be necessary to disguise the Bible style, and we may follow the text exactly. Let me try the 23rd chapter of Matthew, omitting 7 verses which refer to subtleties of Hebrew casuistry, for which we should have to go to Lyman Abbott or St. Alphonsus to find a parallel. Then Jesus mounted upon a soapbox, and began a speech, saying, The doctors of divinity and Episcopalians fill the Fifth Avenue churches, and it would be all right if you were to listen to what they preach, and do that. But don't follow their actions, for they never practice what they preach. They load the backs of the working classes with crushing burdens, but they themselves never move a finger to carry a burden, and everything they do is for show. They wear frock coats and silk hats on Sundays, and they sit at the speaker's table at the banquets of the Civic Federation, and they occupy the best pews in the churches, and their doings are reported in all the papers. They are called leading citizens and pillars of the church. But don't you be called leading citizens, for the only useful man is the man who produces. Applause. And whoever exalts himself shall be abased, and whoever humbles himself shall be exalted. Woe unto you, doctors of divinity and Catholics, hypocrites, for you shut up the kingdom of heaven against men. You don't go in yourself, and you don't let others go in. Woe unto you, doctors of divinity and Presbyterians, hypocrites, for you foreclose mortgages on widows' houses, and for a pretense you make long prayers. For this you will receive the greater damnation. Woe unto you, doctors of divinity and Methodists, hypocrites, for you send missionaries to Africa to make one convert, and when you have made him, he is twice as much a child of hell as yourselves. Applause. Woe unto you, blind guides, with your subtleties of doctrine, your transubstantiation and consubstantiation and all the rest of it, you fools and blind. Woe unto you, doctors of divinity and Episcopalians, hypocrites, For you drop your checks into the collection plate, and you pay no heed to the really important things in the Bible, which are justice and mercy and faith and goodness. You blind guides who strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. Laughter. Woe unto you, doctors of divinity and Anglicans, hypocrites, for you bathe yourselves and dress in immaculate clothing, but within you are full of extortion and excess. You blind high churchmen, clean first your hearts, so that the clothes you wear may represent you. Woe unto you, doctors of divinity and Baptists, hypocrites, for you are like marble tombs which appear beautiful on the outside, but inside are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Even so you appear righteous to men, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. Applause. Woe unto you, doctors of divinity and Unitarians, hypocrites, because you erect statues to dead reformers, and put wreaths upon the tombs of old-time martyrs. You say, if we had been alive in those days, we would not have helped to kill those good men. That ought to show you how to treat us at present. Laughter. But you are the children of those who killed the good men, so go ahead and kill us too. You serpents, you generation of vipers, how can you escape the damnation of hell? At this point, according to the report published in the Jerusalem Times, a police sergeant stepped up to the orator and notified him that he was under arrest. He submitted quietly, but one of his followers attempted to use a knife, and was severely clubbed. Jesus was taken to the station house followed by a riotous throng, and held upon a charge of disorderly conduct. Next morning the Reverend Dr. Caiaphas of Old Trinity appeared against him, and Magistrate Pilate sentenced him to 6 months on Blackwell's Island, remarking that from this time on he proposed to make an example of those soapbox orators who persist in using threatening and abusive language. Just as the prisoner was being led away, a detective appeared with a requisition from the governor, ordering that Jesus be taken to San Francisco, where he is under indictment for murder in the first degree, it being charged that his teachings helped to incite the Preparedness Day explosion. The Church Machine. The Catholics of his time came to Jesus and said, "Master, we would have a sign of thee," meaning that they wanted him to do some magic, to prove to their vulgar minds that his power came from God. He answered by calling them an evil and adulterous generation, which is exactly what I have said about the papal machine. The Baptists and Methodists and Presbyterians and other book worshippers of his time accused him of violating the sacred commands so definitely set down in their ancient texts, and to them he answered that the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. He called them hypocrites, and quoted Karl Marx at them. "This people honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me." Because he despised the company of the respectables, and went among the humble and human folk of his own class in the places where they gathered, the public houses, the churchly scandal-mongers called him "a man gluttonous, and a wine-bibber, a friend of publicans and sinners," precisely as in the old days they used to sneer at the socialists for having their meetings in the back rooms of saloons, and precisely as they still denounce us as free lovers and atheists. But the longing for justice between man and man, which is the kingdom of heaven on earth, is the deepest instinct of the human heart, and the voice of the carpenter cannot be confined within the thickest church walls, nor drowned by all the pealing organs in Christendom. Even in these days, when the power of mammon is more widespread, more concentrated and more systematized than ever before in history, even in these days of Morgan and Rockefeller, there are Christian clergymen who dare to preach as Jesus preached. One by one they are cast out of the church. Father McGlynn, George D. Herron, Alexander Irvine, J. Stitt Wilson, Austin Adams, Algernon Crapsey, Balk White. But their voices are not silenced. They are like the leaven, to which Jesus compared the kingdom of God. A woman took it and hid it in 3 measures of meal, till the whole was leavened. The young theological students read, and some of them understand. I know 3 brothers in one family who have just gone into the church, and are preaching straight social revolution, and the scribes and the Pharisees have not yet dared to cast them out. In this book I have portrayed the Christian church as the servant and henchman of big business, a part of the system of mammon. Every church is necessarily a money machine, holding and administering property. And it is not alone the Catholic Church which is in politics, seeking favors from the state, the exemption of church property from taxation, exemption of ministers from military service, free transportation for them and their families on the railroads, the control of charity and education, laws to deprive people of amusements on Sunday, so on through a long list. As the churches have to be built with money, you find that in them the rich possess the control and demand the deference, while the poor are humble and in their secret hearts jealous and bitter. In other words, the class struggle is in the churches, as everywhere else in the world, and the social revolution is coming in the churches, just as it is coming in industry. It is a fact of deep significance that the majority of ministers are proletarians, eking out their existence upon a miserable salary, and beholden in all their comings and goings to the wealthy holders of privilege. Even in the Roman Catholic Church that is true. The ordinary priest is a man of the working class, and knows what working people suffer and feel. So in the Catholic Church there are proletarian rebellions. There is many a priest who does not carry out the political orders of his superiors, but goes to the polls and votes for his class instead of for his pope. In Ireland, as I write, the young priests are defying their bishops and joining the Sinn Féin, a non-religious movement for an Irish republic. What is it that keeps the average working man in subjection to the exploiter? Simply terror, the terror of losing his job. And if you could get into the inmost soul of Christian ministers, you would find that precisely the same force is keeping many of them slaves to tradition. They are educated men, and thousands of them must resent the dilemma which compels them to be either fools or hypocrites. They have caught enough of the spirit of their time not to enjoy having to pose as miracle mongers, rainmakers, and witch doctors. They would like to say frankly that they do not believe that Jonah ever swallowed the whale, and even that they are dubious about Hercules and Achilles and other demigods. But they are part of a machine, and the old men and the rich men who run the machine have laid down the law. Those who find themselves tempted to think, remember suddenly that they have wives and children. They have only one profession. They have been unfitted for any other by a lifetime of study of dead things, as well as by the practice of altruism. But now the social revolution is coming upon swift wings. It may be here before this book sees the light. And who knows but then we may see in America that wonderful sight which we saw in Russia, when Christian monks assembled and burned their holy books, and petitioned the state to take them in as citizens and human beings? It is my belief that when the power of exploitation is broken, we shall see the dead hand crumble into dust, as a mummy crumbles when it is exposed to the air. All those men who stay in the church and pretend to believe nonsense, because it affords an easy way to earn a living, will suddenly realize that it is possible to earn a living outside, that any man can go into a factory, clean and well ventilated and humanly run, and by 4 hours' work can earn the purchasing power of $10 or $15. Do you not think that there may be some who will choose freedom and self-respect on those terms? And what of those thousands and tens of thousands who join the church because it is a part of the regime of respectability, a way to make the acquaintance of the rich, to curry favor and obtain promotion, to get customers if you are a tradesman, to extend your practice if you are a professional man? And what about the millions who go to church because they are poor, and because life is a desperate struggle, and this is one way to keep the favor of the boss, to get a little better chance for the children, to get charity if you fall into need, in short, to acquire influence with the well-to-do and powerful, who stand together, and like to see the poor humble and reverent, contented in that state of life to which it has pleased God to call them? The Church Redeemed. Do I mean that I expect to see the church, all churches, perish and pass away? I do not, for I believe that the church answers one of the fundamental needs of man. The social revolution will abolish poverty and parasitism. It will make temptations fewer, and the soul's path through life much easier. But it will not remove the necessity of struggle for individual virtue. It will only clear the way for the discovery of newer and higher types of virtue. Men will gather more than ever in beautiful places to voice their love of life and of one another. But the places in which they gather will be places swept clean of superstition and tyranny. As the Reformation compelled the Catholic Church to cleanse itself and abolish the grossest of its abuses, so the social revolution will compel it to repudiate its defense of parasitism and exploitation. I will record the prophecy that by the year 1950 all Catholic authorities will be denying that the Church ever opposed socialism, true socialism, just as today they deny that the Church ever tortured Galileo, ever burned men for teaching that the earth moves around the sun, ever sold the right to commit crime, ever gave away the New World to Spain and Portugal, ever buried newly born infants in the cellars of nunneries. The social revolution will compel all churches, Christian, Hebrew, Buddhist, Confucian, or what you will, to drive out their formalists and traditionalists. If there is any church that refuses so to adapt itself, the swift progress of enlightenment and freedom will leave it without followers. But in the great religions, which have a soul of goodness and sincerity, we may be sure that reformers will arise, prophets and saints who, as of old, will preach the living word of God. In many churches today we can see the beginning of that new counter-reformation. Even in the Catholic Church there is a modernist rebellion. Read the books of the Ceylon and Fagazzaro's trilogy of novels, The Saint, and you will see a genuine and vital protest against the economic corruption of the church. In America, the Knights of Slavery have been forced by public pressure to support a war for democracy, and even to compete with the YMCA in the training camps. They are doing good work, I am told. This gradual conquest of the old religiosity by the spirit of modern common sense is shown most interestingly in the Salvation Army. William Booth was a man with a great heart, who took his life into his hands and went out with a bass drum to save the lost souls of the slums. He was stoned and jailed, but he persisted, and brought his captives to Jesus. Vermin-eaten saints with moldy breath, unwashed legions with the ways of death. Incidentally, the general learned to know his slum population. He had not wanted to engage in charity and material activities. He feared hypocrisy and corruption. But in his writings he lets us see how utterly impossible it is for a man of real heart to do anything for the souls of the slum dwellers without at the same time helping their diseased and hunger-racked bodies. So the Salvation Army was forced into useful work: old clothes depots, nights lodgings, Christmas dinners, farm colonies, until today the bare list of the various kinds of enterprises it carries on fills 3 printed pages. It is all done with the money of the rich, and is tainted by subservience to authority, but no one can deny that it is better than Gibson's preservative, and the fox-hunting parsons filling themselves with port. And in Protestant churches the advance has been even greater. Here and there you will find a real rebel, hanging on to his job and preaching the proletarian Jesus, while even the great Fifth Avenue churches are making attempts at missions and settlements in the slums. The more vital churches are gradually turning themselves into societies for the practical betterment of their members. Their clergy are running boys' clubs and sewing schools for girls, food conservation lectures for mothers, social study clubs for men. You get prayer meetings and psalm singing along with this, but here is the fact that hangs always before the clergyman's face, that with prayer meetings and psalm singing alone he has a hard time, while with clubs and educational societies and social reforms he thrives. And now the war has broken upon the world, and caught the churches, like everything else, in its mighty current. The clergy and the congregations are confronted by pressing national needs. They are forced to take notice of 1,000 new problems, to engage in 1,000 practical activities. No one can see the end of this, any more than he can see the end of the vast upheaval in politics and industry. But we who are trained in revolutionary thought can see the main outlines of the future. We see that in these new church activities the clergy are inspired by things read, not in ancient Hebrew texts, but in the daily newspapers. They are responding to the actual, instant needs of their boys in the trenches and the camps. And this is bound to have an effect upon their psychology. Just as we can say that an English girl who leaves the narrow circle of her old life and goes into a munition factory and joins a union and takes part in its debates, will never after be a docile home slave, so we can say that the clergyman who helps in YMCA work in France or in Red Cross organization in America will be less the bigot and formalist forever after. He will have learned, in spite of himself, to adjust means to ends. He will have learned cooperation and social solidarity by the method which modern educators most favor, by doing. Also, he will have absorbed a mass of ideas in news dispatches from over the world. He is forced to read these dispatches carefully, because the fate of his own boys is involved. And we socialists will see to it that the dispatches are well filled with propaganda. End of Book 7, Part 2.